I call this February 4th Planning Commission meeting to order. We have two new members of the committee, of the board that joined us today. I'd like to welcome both of you to the board. We are so excited to serve with you. I believe you have both been sworn in. Excellent. To my left, one of the new members is Donna Davis and Valerie Manley. And sometimes I ask the new members to introduce themselves, tell us who they are and what they do. If you'd like to, feel free.
Sure. I'm Dana Davis. I have lived in the city of Alpharetta for 8 years. I have, my husband and I have 3 kids, 8, 7, and 6, so it's a lot of fun. I'm very involved in the community from being involved at the schools, but I'm also a pharmacist with CVS. I served with the Rec Commission for 2.5 years, and so I'm glad to be joining you guys today.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
My name's Valerie Manley. I'm a 32-year resident of Alpharetta, and I've been involved with city issues for about 25 of those years. Became the liaison for the community of Windward to the city of Alpharetta several years ago, and have since become a member of their board of directors for the HOA. I suppose I've been here often enough involved with planning commission issues that they decided that it may as well put me to work. So I'm here. Happy to be here, happy to help, and good to see all of you.
Welcome aboard. We have the first item on the agenda is the minutes from the last meeting, January 7th. What is the desire of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the meetings of January 7th, 2021.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Or in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. There are 2 items on the agenda that have been deferred. One is PH 21-03 UDC text amendments, requisites for public hearing requests. That's deferred by the staff. The second one is Z-20-05/CU-20-09/V-20-14 Arcovi Condominiums 8292 Thompson Street has been deferred also by the applicant and will not be discussed at this meeting. So if you're here for those 2 items, they will not be heard. And we have one item to discuss, and whatever the decision is made here, if it's to recommend to City Council, it will be heard on February the 22nd. And it is CLUP-21-01/Z-21-02/V-20-03, the 1858 residential subdivision, and Mr. Michael Woodman will be presenting.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you this evening is a comprehensive land use plan amendment, rezoning and variance to allow the 1858, which is a residential subdivision, 11 single-family detached homes on 1.68 acres in the downtown. Have the location map on the overhead. The subject property is located at 0, 73, 89, and 109 Cumming Street on the south side of Cumming Street across from Manning Drive. The properties represent a few parcels of land with frontage on Cumming Street with 2 detached homes, and I do have a few streetscape views. This is at Cricket Lane, looking towards Alpharetta First United Methodist Church down Cumming Street. And this gray home represents the first property as part of this request. This is moving down Cumming Street towards Main Street. And this is the property, the wooded property on the left of the photo. This is the property looking south at the property from Manning Drive, so where the trees are in this view. And this is looking from closer to Main Street, looking east at the property. So you see the church's parking lot wraps around here, and this is an entrance into the church at this location. Surrounding properties are zoned downtown residential and R15 to the north, downtown residential to the east, O&I R15 and downtown residential to the south, and O&I to the west. The Taylor Morrison development and Manning Drive subdivisions are located to the north. The East of Main Phase 2 development is located to the east and south. And of course, Alpharetta First United Methodist Church is located to the south and west. The applicant is requesting a change to the future land use designation of the property. So a small portion of the property has the downtown residential density that allows for residential uses. So this portion already has the appropriate future land use. It's the remainder of the property that is currently has a future land use of public institutional educational, which is a future land use reserved for government properties or places of worship or educational facilities. A rezoning is also requested with this application from O&I and R15, and they are asking to rezone the entire property to the DTR zoning, which is consistent with the zoning to the east. The applicant, as part of this request, has 3 variances. The first variance is to the definition of a lot. The definition of a lot does not allow you to count a street or an alley as part of the lot to meet the minimum lot size. So the applicant is asking to allow the new proposed alley that will provide access to each of these homes that front on Cumming Street to allow that alley to be included within the lot. So in this DTR zoning district, the minimum lot size is 4,500 square feet. The average proposed lot size within this subdivision is 4,758 square feet. And of course, that does include the alley. The alley is about 16 feet wide, so on average, the alley represents about 572 square feet of each of those lots. There have been similar variances granted at subdivisions within the downtown, and of course, East of Main to the east received a variance to allow alleys within the residential lots. The second variance requested by the applicant is to the side setback. In DTR, the side setback is 0 feet with 10 feet between structures. The applicant is asking to change the 10 feet to 8 feet between structures. The 8 feet between structures will allow the applicant to provide this pocket park, which has tree saves within it. So there are existing larger specimen trees that will be saved within that pocket park. And then the third variance is to allow an encroachment on the 150-foot perennial stream. So these lines here shown on the property represent the stream buffer associated with a perennial stream. The applicant is basically asking to reduce that 150-foot perennial buffer on the north side of that stream to an 80-foot average width enhanced stream. And what the enhanced stream represents is, as part of any request for variance to a stream buffer reduction, the applicant is to bring forward mitigation to mitigate that impact to the stream buffer. So the applicant is proposing to remove invasive species along that north portion of the buffer and to revegetate the area. Of course, the stream to the west is piped on the Alpharetta First United Methodist property. The church received approval from the state as well as from the city back in 2012 in order to pipe the stream to allow the church to expand its parking lot. So the stream is piped from this, the stream at this point right here goes into a series of detention ponds, and then it is piped over to the west. Over to the east, on the East of Main Phase 2 development, they received a stream buffer variance to reduce the stream from 150 down to 75. The reason why that particular variance was originally supported and ultimately approved is that section of stream, this goes right up to Cricket Lane, and then of course the stream is piped underneath Cricket Lane. But because this section of stream that was unpiped was less than 600 feet, it was basically the Providence Group came forward and said that they would be able to get a stream buffer variance from the state in order to pipe it on their property. And since we wanted to maintain that stream in its natural state, the variance was granted on the East of Main Phase 2 property. All right. And turning to the site plan, there are 11, as I mentioned before, 11 single-family detached homes. They're oriented to Cumming Street. There's an 8-foot, the required 8-foot sidewalk is provided along Cumming Street to enhance walkability in the downtown. The lot sizes range from about 4,500 square feet to about 5,800 square feet. And as I mentioned, the average lot size is 4,785. These are two-story homes, so they will look like 2 stories from Cumming Street. There is topography on this property, so it does slope down towards the stream. So the applicant proposes to use a basement level with a parking garage at the rear. So it's 2 stories over basement. There are front courtyards as well as a covered back deck. The covered deck sits over top of the code compliant driveway. So each unit will have 2 parking spaces within the garage as well as the code compliant driveway. Each driveway, as shown on the site plan, is dimensioned out at 20 by 20 to accommodate 2 additional cars. Downtown code would require 28 total spaces for this development, of which there are 44 spaces total available, so 4 spaces for each home. And then the applicant has also provided a letter indicating that they have an offsite from Alpharetta First United Methodist Church, indicating that they have an offsite parking agreement within the existing parking lot for overflow guest parking. Those are 12 unassigned parking spaces available at all times except for on Sundays during church services. There are many trees on the property. If you've looked at the aerials or been out to the site, you'll see that there are quite a few trees on the property, primarily hardwoods. There are 2 oaks, I believe a 24-inch and a 32-inch specimen quality oaks in this pocket park. And there are actually additional trees that the applicant is going to look at within this pocket park, 2 more oaks. I believe one is a water oak, and I'm not sure that the other one has been identified. But there are, I believe, 20-inch oaks, and they could possibly also be saved within this pocket park. I'll mention it when we get to the conditions, but there are also a few boundary trees that we have placed conditions on, asking the applicant to look at those and make reasonable efforts to try to save those. There are 2 red buds in this general location over here, and then there are 2 southern magnolias along the frontage of Cumming Street. It's very questionable if they can be saved, given that the applicant is required to address the streetscape improvements along Cumming Street. Of course, the pocket park by itself will meet the required open space for the development. It's a 0.2 acre pocket park. And then the applicant has stated on the site plan that they intend to utilize the church's detention ponds. So those ponds, when they were designed, had enough capacity in them to provide detention for this development. And then these are the renderings that the applicant has proposed. The applicant has proposed a variety of styles approved in the downtown. The applicant's architect specifically called out Tudor, Georgian, Federal, and Greek Revival architectural styles. According to the applicant's architects, the homes will primarily be brick or siding with stone and hard coat accents. We did send the renderings to the downtown consultant for review, and the downtown consultant believes that the applicant's proposal is appropriate at this location. And then there were just a couple of comments that were listed in the staff report from the downtown consultant, and we're just recommending that the applicant comply with those comments. The trip generation report estimates that the subdivision would generate 13 a.m. peak hour trips and 12 p.m. peak hour trips. This request was shown to the public on January 13th at the Community Zoning Information Meeting. There were some questions about the size, price point, and parking, and with all comments in support of the applicant's proposal. And of course, staff reviewed the applicant's proposal and did not, and found that the request did not conflict with the established review criteria. The comprehensive land use plan amendment is consistent with the designation of the portion of the property to the east and contiguous properties to the east. The zoning is consistent with the use and development of nearby properties, which are primarily developed with similar residential uses and densities. And approval of the variances should not cause substantial detriment to the public good. The stream buffer variances have been approved on adjacent properties with sections to the east and west already piped. And of course, staff is recommending additional stream buffer encroachment mitigation, which I will review as part of the conditions. With that, staff is recommending approval subject to the following conditions. Condition 1 deals with the site-specific requirement tying it to the 1/20/2021 site plan. 2, the comprehensive land use plan designation of the property shall be downtown residential density. 3 deals with the architecture and materials and ties it to the submitted renderings. We also add in additional language that says a minimum of 6 homes shall be 4-sided brick or stone, and each home shall have a unique elevation with respect to design, material, and color. A minimum of 6 homes shall have a chimney, and a minimum of 6 homes shall have a front covered porch. 4, building height shall be limited to no more than 2 stories and 35 feet along Cumming Street. 5, lots shall have a front yard defined by a decorative low wall, brick or stone, or hedge with columns, brick or stone, as approved by Design Review Board. Hardscape in front yards is limited to decorative brick pavers and stepping stones and shall not cover more than 25% of the front yard. And the reason why we did that is because we do have a requirement still on back of sidewalk for the landscape strip, so we did want to make sure that we had sufficient room to plant the required landscape strip material. Condition 6, side setback shall be 8 feet between structures, and private alleys shall be permitted to count toward meeting the minimum lot size. Variances to the maximum lot coverage shall not be permitted. So we added that sentence, that last sentence, into condition 6, since that alley is within each of those lots. Each lot has a maximum coverage, so building coverage as well as impervious coverage. So basically, we're stating that there will be no future variances to that maximum coverage on those lots. Condition 7, Cumming Street streetscape shall generally be improved as follows: 30-foot half-width right-of-way to incorporate a minimum 4-foot planter, 8-foot concrete sidewalk, 10-foot travel lane, street trees, and decorative pedestrian lights with final approval by staff. 8 deals with shade trees along the planter actually what they're showing here. So within the green strip between the travel lanes and the sidewalk, as well as shade trees on the back of sidewalk. The idea is to create a canopy to shade the sidewalk for pedestrians. Condition 9, residential alley shall meet the streetscape standards in the Alpharetta Downtown Code. Condition 10, project entrance shall include decorative paver apron, landscaping, and low wall. The decorative paver apron is typically just like a brick paver section at the front, just to make that look more aesthetically pleasing. Condition 11, northwest corner of the property shall include a community focal feature as approved by the Arts Committee. 12, pocket park shall be developed with a park-like setting with decorative landscape, hardscape, low walls, and seating. Landscape shall include plant selections promoting the historic downtown. Exotic and invasive trees and shrubs shall be removed in the pocket park as approved by staff. 13, creeping vines shall be planted to cover retaining and low walls as approved by staff. Condition number 14 deals with the tree saves, so it specifically calls out the 2 tree saves in the pocket park. It also discusses the 2 magnolias and the 2 red buds that I mentioned earlier, asking the applicant to make reasonable efforts if those trees are savable to save those. Condition 15, developer shall plant the area west of Lot 1 to landscape buffer standards, and a 5-foot landscape strip shall be planted along the eastern property line. 16, fences and walls visible from the public right-of-way shall be decorative as approved by staff. Unfinished wood fences and decks shall not be visible from the street. Condition 17 was added. There was a bit of a conflict between a comment from the fire marshal. The fire marshal has confirmed to me that they would fight the fire from Cumming Street, and they don't have any reason to access the alley with a fire truck. Therefore, they would not need a turnaround within this alley area. So condition number 17, the applicant is requesting to remove that, and that is a reasonable request. Condition number 18, prior to the issuance of a land disturbance permit, developer shall provide the city with a copy of the parking agreement with the church for 12 off-site parking spaces. Condition number 19 specifically addresses the stream buffer encroachment mitigation. So it ties the applicant's proposed 80-foot average width enhanced buffer, so it requires them to provide the removal of invasives as well as the revegetation of the stream buffer on the north side of the stream. But it also requires additional stream buffer encroachment mitigation, such as the following. A, provide an additional 20% runoff reduction of water quality volume for the project's new impervious area, which is in addition to the standard requirement. B, provide an ecological assessment of existing vegetation for the off-site riparian buffers on the south side of the stream. So this specifically deals with the south side of the stream on the church's property. And it goes into additional specific requirements for what that plan looks like. C, provide off-site stream restoration within the watershed. And D, other options that provide an ecological lift as approved by staff. And it could be one or a combination of any of those, of course, final approval by our stormwater engineer. Condition number 20. Condition number 20 was added due to some concerns with water quantity. So this is really specific to dealing with specific to detention. 20 says developer shall provide an additional 20% channel protection volume in addition to the standard requirement for the site as approved by staff. An exemption from channel protection volume as described in GSMM 2.2.4.2 will not be permitted for this property. And this is at the recommendation of our stormwater engineer that this condition was added. Condition 21, garbage pickup shall be from the alley, not Cumming Street. And condition number 22, no more than 10% of the residential units shall be rented, and requiring that to be recorded in the HOA declarations and covenants. And that concludes the presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Michael, for your detailed presentation as always. I have a very few questions to start off, any questioning by the board. And one is the allowance of the variance to utilize the square footage on the alley as part of the lot size. Do we have precedent for that? Have we done that before?
Yes, those types of variances have been approved, and they're been specific to the downtown. We have had those types of requests outside of the downtown. They've not typically been approved outside the downtown. East of Main Phase 2, so the development immediately to the east, they received approval of a variance to allow the alley within the residential lots.
And that alley is private.
I'm sorry?
It's a private alley. It's not going to
Yes.
be dedicated.
It is a private alley.
Well, what is the length of the creek that is piped in the immediate vicinity? Do you have that information?
I don't know. The applicant probably could answer that a little bit better than I. I'm not sure about the length. So the section to the west on the church's property is piped, and I'm not sure how long that section is. The applicant probably will have some additional information. Of course, to the east, it's piped underneath Cricket Lane.
Okay. And the last one is the sharing of the detention pond with the church. Does that require an agreement? And who does the maintenance?
Yes, so there's required maintenance of that pond, and there's actually zoning conditions attached to that 2012 stream buffer variance that allowed the church to pipe that section of the stream, and the result was the two detention pond system that they have there currently. So there are requirements in our code as well as in those zoning conditions for maintenance. I know that our Public Works Department will be going over there just to take a look, just to make sure that everything's been maintained. They usually do that on a rotating 5-year basis. Yes, there'll need to be some kind of agreement since it's technically off-site.
And this is between the church and the applicant. I see
Correct.
Mr. Lauderdale nodding. I didn't see such accordation on your accordations. Does it need to be accordation of zoning or not?
I've talked to the stormwater engineer about this at length, and he hadn't made any kind of recommendations that we need that. I'll discuss maybe when the applicant is up here. We'll discuss amongst ourselves and see if we think that we need a condition, but I believe it'd be covered by the code.
All right. Any further questions for Michael that he has not already answered in his presentation?
Yeah, I just have one, Michael. On condition 17 that you guys agreed to strike, is there any other precedent that's been set where we don't have roads that the fire truck will be able to get down? The only reason I ask is because if the car is burning in the garage, that's a rear access.
So I've talked to the fire marshal about this morning when this came through, and the 16-foot pavement width that they're providing is sufficient for a fire truck.
Okay.
So they can get back there. The issue is what I've been told by the fire marshal is they have no need to go back there, but they can get a truck back there, he said.
So my quick question, has there been a hydrology study done, or is that done after, or when is that done to figure out the stream flow?
It's typically a hydrology study would typically be done after this process with the land disturbance permit process because it's a costly study to put together. However, I don't know the answer to your question. There's a chance that the applicant may have looked at that already, so you may want to ask the applicant about that.
This stream, is it an active stream? Has it been mapped? Is it part of a floodplain, 100-year flood, 500-year flood? Is it ever?
Yeah, this is a stream that's been mapped. It's a perennial stream, so it has water flows through it, which is why it has the 150-foot buffer as opposed to the non-perennial stream of buffer of 75 feet. But yes, this is a mapped stream.
Does it have a designation, how often it floods? I mean, do you know if it's 100
I don't have that information, but again, I think the applicant has quite a bit of information on the stream, and I suppose that they'll probably be able to better answer that question.
All right, and I'm just curious, the number 3, you mentioned about the fronts look interiors. Are they going to, is that something that's they have to come to approve and say, this one's going to look like this? Is that something that they have to come before, or that's just visual?
So we used to only send, we used to only review residential developments by the downtown consultant and staff. And we've been sending all developments, whether they're residential or non-residential, to the design review board. So they will have to take each of these homes either one by one or as a package to the design review board for final approval. And that will include the comments of the downtown consultant.
And one other question, my last question. It went from a 10-foot, it went from 10 feet to 8 feet. Was the 10 feet, was that like a National Fire, an NFPA ordinance or something, or provision that you had to have 10 feet between, and you've gone down to 8? That's not violating any fire protection?
No, because you can get structures on the side. You can bring a structure right up to another structure. It's just all about how it's built. You have to fire rate the walls the closer that they get. Some of the homes, I think in Boise development, for example, I think some of those homes are within 3 feet of the other. So we weren't overly concerned with the request to reduce down to 8 feet.
Michael, I've got a quick question.
Sure.
The 2 detention ponds that you mentioned, they are underground covered?
No, they're open ponds.
They're open ponds, okay. So that it will be apparent if there's any overflow issues.
Yeah, you can see, you'll be able
Okay,
to see.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just have one further question. On condition 19, you're talking about the improvements and the vegetative management. That's all on the church property, correct?
No, it's not all on the church property. It's mostly on the church property. Let me show you.
Oh, wait, I just want to be clear. This is supposed to be not ornamental, and it's supposed to be still vegetative wooded. So there should be no ongoing maintenance, because if we're improving something and then have no maintenance plan, or does it need a maintenance plan,
If it's not, I can tell you that the wording that's in condition number 19 came straight from our stormwater engineer. He
Okay.
felt very confident that this was appropriate at this location. We've used a similar type condition on another recent stream buffer variance where we gave some options to the applicant in order to mitigate those impacts. So I can only speak to what he has provided here, and we feel very confident that that will cover it. But just to answer your first part of your question, there is a small portion of this that would be technically kind of on the southern portion of these lots on the south side of where the alley is. But you are correct so this would represent, the stream is approximately in this location here. So the applicant's proposed 80-foot enhanced buffer is partially on their property as well as on the church property. And then the additional options the additional options, specifically B, that talks about the south side of the stream would be down in this location here. And again, on the church's property.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? You have opportunity to ask more questions after the applicant and during the discussions. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I would ask the applicant to come forward and make a presentation. Mr. Orinda, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen you this year.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman. Is this microphone live? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I don't have to shout, huh? Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, I'm Don Rollator. My office address is 200 Foothills Parkway, Marble Hill, Georgia, 30148. Recently relocated my office, so I'm up in the woods, and it's wonderful to be there. Tonight, I'm happy to represent Vision Development Partners for the creation of 11-lot subdivision of single-family homes on 1.6 acres on Cumming Street. Presenting tonight will be Steve Smith, Development Partners, Chris Owens, principal in Plum Creek Consulting, and I don't think he's a stranger to any of you. He's our land planner. David Grace, principal in a classical studio, who is our architect and who designed these homes. Our landscape architect is Pat Corkle. He's principal in Pat Corkle Landscape Architect. Simply stated, the request is to change the CLUP from public institutional education, which is what the church was, to downtown residential density. A change in the zoning is requested from O&I and R15 to DTR, downtown residential. 3 variances are requested. Michael has covered those in depth. I won't wear you out by doing it again. All 3 requests made by the applicant are recommended for approval by staff. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the podium over to Steve Smith, who will basically give you the vision of how this was created, and then our second speaker, Chris Owens, I believe, can answer all of your technical questions. And if we miss any, please remind us and we'll go forward with that. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Steve Smith. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Don. My name is Stephen Smith. I live at 380 Majestic Cove in Milton, Georgia, 30004. My wife, Wendy, and I have lived in the Alpharetta, Milton area for about 21 years now. And this project actually started with me looking for a place in downtown Alpharetta to build a home for Wendy and I to move to. That was about 2 years ago. I've got a lot of friends that go to Alpharetta First United Methodist Church, and so we struck up a conversation, and 2 years later, I'm standing here talking to you tonight, so we're excited about it. We came up with the name, the 1858, it's a little humorous side note here. So my son came up with the name and the logo, and he sent it to me. He goes, and I said, son, that looks great. I said, but what's the significance of 1858? And he said, Dad, you probably ought to know that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, that's the year Alpharetta was founded. And I said, you're probably right, son. I should know that if I'm going to develop in downtown Alpharetta. So the 1858 is really intended to offer a product that we think is somewhat unique to the downtown housing market. And specifically, these will be approximately 3,500 square foot homes. We'll have the garages in the back. They won't be facing Cumming Street. And one of the things that's really important to me, I enjoy cooking out and outdoor living space, and it's hard to find in townhomes and homes in downtown Alpharetta, and we'll be offering that with these homes. So we feel like that's going to be a product or a feature that's going to be very desired by prospective buyers. The other thing that Michael touched on is that we feel like we have ample parking. I know that as we've looked around at some of the other developments in downtown Alpharetta, some of them have some parking challenges, just to be very honest. So we've addressed that, and we feel like that's going to be an amenity that'll be very popular with the residents. The other thing I want to mention is, before I turn it over to Chris and let him talk more specifically about the zoning and the variances and answer some of the questions that you brought up previously, the plan that we've come up with and kind of where we are now with the development is a result of multiple meetings with city staff, interacting and suggestions that they had. So this is a kind of a collaborative process, not only from our team, but also from the city staff, and they've been great to work with. So having said that, let me turn it over to Chris and let you do your part. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Chris Owens. My address is 7425 Mid-Broadwell Trace, Alpharetta, Georgia. Proud to be an Alpharetta resident and an Alpharetta-based business, Plum Creek Consulting. When Steve contacted me about this project, the first reaction was I didn't realize there and enough room for that. And as we started looking at it, and as he said, we evolved through maybe 20 plans, Steve, something like that, with the help of Kathy Cook and Michael and the city staff So what you're seeing before you tonight is something that has been very carefully thought out and has been put together to let you consider. As Michael said in his presentation, this zoning request is based on 3 variances. He did a good job of outlining that, and they are interrelated variances that are codependent. The variance for the side setback or side separation from the homes, as Michael said, does allow us to preserve some space in the center of the property for a pocket park. The driveway for the entrance to the project is offset from Manning Drive. That's not what we would have preferred, but that is what we arrived at with staff in order to save those trees as well. So tightening up that space between the homes allows us to give those trees a better chance of survival and provide that elbow room there in the center of the project. And I believe someone asked about fire code and building separation. That was discussed with the city's building department chief building officer. The code does allow that. There will be some restrictions on the amount of openings we can have on those sides. So the architect will have to take that into consideration, but it can be done and has been addressed with the building official. So I wanted you to be comfortable with that. The property is fairly close to the stream from Cumming Street down to the stream. With the stream buffer, when you apply that, it does create a hardship that the stream buffer almost reaches Cumming Street. And the site plan that Michael presented, I've colored for you here, and I don't know if, Ben, can you make that available for them to see?
Well, we're looking at it.
Thank you. What you see, the narrow banding of stream buffer that you see to the east or to the right side of the plan is the result of the stream buffer variance granted to east of Main. The red strip is the 25-foot buffer mandated by the state. The orange and yellow strips are the 50 and 75-foot buffers required by the city after that reduction was applied to east of Main. When you look west of the detention pond, or where the detention ponds are to the west, and I'm going to show you an aerial view of that, you see the green strip of the property we're talking about. And I believe, Ms. Manley, you asked if those ponds were covered or if they're open. They are open, and I've represented those. I've put a blue shade over each of those ponds so that you can see where those are. When that piping was approved, and Mr. Kungu, the church received approval from the state to pipe approximately 280 feet of stream, upstream. When that was done, the buffers went away. So as you can see, what we have remaining is, I believe, an unintended consequence of a state approval to the west and a city approval to the east, where there is a very narrow but wide protruding piece of buffer that comes up into the property, which makes it somewhat awkward to use for anything. So that is the reason for our request to reduce that buffer down to an average buffer from the rear of the lots to the center of the stream. Our proposal was to enhance that buffer. We went out and looked at it and had an ecologist do a report for it. And what you have is you don't have a pristine, undisturbed buffer that's been there since the beginning of that stream formation. What you have is property that was developed as single-family homes. It was gardened, it was planted, there were trees put in, and then they were neglected and overgrown, which is a typical pattern of suburban and urban development. So what we have is is invasive, non-native species that were introduced that have now become overgrown. And our ecologist is advising us that over time, that buffer will tear itself down and will not be sustainable. So our proposal to the city was to get rid of those invasive species by hand with the little disturbance as possible. And Pat Corkle, our landscape architect, is going to work with our ecologist to layer in native species into a proper buffer that won't require maintenance and that will be sustainable by itself over time. We believe the enhanced buffer, along with intercepting the runoff from the development and routing it through the ponds there at the church, will provide a better water quality and watershed management option versus leaving that buffer as is in the state that I've described. And I believe someone asked about the capacity of those ponds. When the church built those ponds, they did do a detailed hydrology study. We have that study and we've analyzed it. We have not done a full hydrology study on this development, but we did copy that study and check the capacity of it, and there is capacity in those ponds for this development. There will be remaining capacity left over for the church for some of its future plans, And the church is a party to that. And Mr. Kungu, you are correct. It will require a joint maintenance agreement that the church and Mr. Smith will enter into, assuming that this variance request and this rezoning request gets your approval and gets council's approval. So we've got quite a few things moving around, but I believe it's fairly straightforward once you look at them all together. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And like we said, we have Mr. Corkle here to answer any landscape-related questions, and we have the architect to answer any questions regarding architecture and design if you would like to explore that.
Well, thank you for appearing before us, Chris. I didn't recognize you with a mask on. Till your name was mentioned.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Chris, if you don't mind, got a question for you.
Oh, sure.
I think listening to other commissioners and kind of some of the questions, and you're an expert about this. And I've walked the property, and I saw those open detention ponds, and you can just, out there in the field, you can see, and there's a huge parking lot, right? You got impervious surface, that rate of speed that water comes into there, that's the reason why they're so big and so large there. From the site that we're looking at here and then creating an impervious surface, the flow of water would go from there into those ponds, right? And then basically the idea is there's plenty of capacity there. Then it will release it down the stream at an appropriate rate of speed, right? Properly done, so there's not a major impact of erosion further down to the east.
To the east, yes.
Yeah. So
That's correct.
if you don't mind, just kind of going through that, right? Because people don't understand the hydrology and kind of how it goes, and it's good for your expertise to kind of talk about that, what that impact would be.
No, that's a great question, Fergal, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I don't want to take for granted that people do automatically see that when we mention detention ponds. But the project will, we will collect runoff from, so we're going to take down 2 homes, which do have impervious cover. There's driveways and there are rooftops and there are patios and things like that out there. We're going to remove that, but we're going to be adding back 11 homes. So there will be additional impervious cover from what there is today. Impervious cover is anything that water can't soak through. It's going to run off. So we're going to collect all that water. There'll be downspout collectors off the roofs. There'll be drains in the alley. We'll collect that and we'll route that to the west along this back alley, and we'll connect it and tie it in and discharge it into the detention ponds that exist for the church. You're correct, Fergal, there's a lot of pavement that goes into those ponds today. But they were built, those ponds were built as big as they are because the church anticipated adding some additional pavement over time. So there is capacity in the pond. So today, when it rains hard, those ponds fill up, they collect water that runs off fast, and it constricts the flow down and lets it out slowly. That's why it backs up in the pond. So the pond will drain over time to regulate that flow downstream. When we add our water, the pond is still going to function that way. Yes, it will fill up more, and it will drain out, but it will still drain out at the same rate that it does today.
Follow-up to that. So
Yes.
Was there any kind of, it wasn't even necessary to do any kind of wetland delineation, or is there anything on this property that indicates that there's any wetlands?
We did do a study, and our ecologist looked at that as well when he was there. And the only wetlands that exist are what's called bed and bank wetlands. So there are wetlands that exist in the very bottom of every stream that you see, practically every stream. I shouldn't say every. So there are some wetlands in the bottom of that stream, but there are not any wetlands outside of the stream bottom. Many places where you see that occur are where there's wide, flat floodplains, where water can jump out of the creek very frequently and then go back down. That does over time sometimes develop wetlands. This area is very defined by topography. So when that stream flows, it is in a defined channel. So the only wetlands that exist are in that stream bottom, and we're not proposing to go in and disturb any of that.
So no delineation then?
No delineation because we're not going to disturb. I believe you were the one that asked a question about floodplain before. This is a perennial stream, but it does not have 100-year, 500-year floodplain.
Hey, Chris, is there any of the creek or the stream going to be piped in this project?
No, there will not.
Chris, is there an earthen dam for either one of the detention ponds?
There is, and there's actually, the way these ponds are designed, there are to work together, so bear with me. You see that paved driveway there?
Right.
That is on top of the earthen dam that forms those 2 ponds. and there's actually a small earthen dam in between the two ponds. These two ponds interact with one another, one behaving as water quality and the other primarily behaving as water quantity control. So those two ponds do operate and function in sync with each other, and there is that earthen dam right here, and I don't know if you can see that right under my cursor, that white box there. That box is what regulates the flow out of the pond into a pipe that then begins the stream just on the other side of that earthen dam.
Okay, so at present, we're going to be introducing impervious to the east of this detention pond
No, into the pond. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, that's okay, because the development extends beyond that earthen dam.
Yes.
So there will be additional impervious surface to the east of that earthen dam that will then be going directly into the stream, correct?
That is not correct.
Okay.
So your first half of your question is correct. We are introducing impervious east of the earthen dam. However, we're going to catch that water in underground pipes, and we're going to pipe that water to the west and discharge it into the ponds before it's allowed to go into the creek.
And you're going to use gravity, in other words, pipe them downhill?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That answers the question I had for condition 19A and 20. Any further questions? Oh, yes, are these wet ponds? I have not seen these ponds.
The existing ponds, I have not studied them extensively enough to know if they're intended to be, but they are wet.
They are wet?
Quite a bit. And we'll answer that question for certain when we get into the final hydrology design, but there is water standing in them today.
Yeah.
And whether that's intentional or whether that's something which sometimes occurs in ponds over time, if that's the case, it'll be corrected before, as part of this construction project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned about the entrance for the homes. You said it was not the ideal location. You were trying to save the trees. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you think it's not a good location, or your
Certainly.
thoughts on that?
Glad to. Let's see. We can get this to behave. This is an easier, much nicer looking picture to look at, thanks to Pat. When I say entrance to the homes, I was referring to the overall development, not individual homes.
Sure.
From a traffic standpoint, ideally, you want your driveway to line up with curb cuts or streets across from you, in this case, Manning Drive. So some of our initial layouts did have our entrance directly across from Manning Drive. When we had our tree survey done, we had an arborist go out and mark these trees, measure them, assess their health. When that came back, some of the nicest and healthiest trees actually are directly across from Manning Drive. So we looked at, and that's some of the plan iteration that we talked about going through with staff. We looked at moving the street, our driveway, from one side or the other of Manning Drive, and this was where we kind of found that balance of tree save versus access. We had a traffic engineer go out and count cars, calculate the distance between the two, and he's written a report to say that he believes this will operate safely. There's not a sight distance issue. There's not a significant number of cars coming from Manning Drive or our driveway. So what we're proposing will work and will be safe.
What is the distance between Manning Drive and the entrance? In feet?
Almost about 100 feet.
So it'll be left or right out of this development?
It will be. And the traffic engineer, Eric Graves, the city traffic planner, he prefers 150 feet. I believe we're right at 100 or a little over. So we're 100, 110 feet. So we are less than his ideal, but he's reviewed our traffic report, talked to our traffic engineer, and they are in agreement on the location of the driveway.
Okay.
And then I just have one further one talking about, you did not adjust the exit of the church at all?
We did
Just
not.
adjusted the medians within the parking lot?
Yes, that's right. So that was one of the options we considered, was adjusting the church access as well, and the church was not favorable of that, so we abandoned that. But we are, pardon me, the existing church parking lot does come up into lots 1, 2, and 3, so we are going to shorten the existing church parking lot a bit in order to make room for that. And I'll see if I can't.
No, that's what it looked like when I walked it, but because there's a lot of traffic coming out of there on Sundays. Just making sure we didn't make it narrower.
Yes, you can see here, see this area right here? Mm-hmm. You can see the existing curb is somewhat shaded back. So we will be removing a portion of the existing parking lot as well to make room for those, for the rear alley and rear space of those lots. And again, the church they're in agreement with Steve, and they're in support of the project as well. So they're aware of that change to their parking lot.
So Chris, this is a real popular, right, product. That's what people want. It's not attached. We're not talking about townhomes. We're talking single-family homes. So streetscape's so important, right? I mean, you're downtown, that whole component of walkability and having that. Any issues up in here, up and down? I heard something about the magnolias, and I know you got your arborist here, or your landscape architect, excuse me, Pat.
Yeah, and Pat can probably speak to that as well. The trees spelled out in the condition from staff, and we've had that conversation openly with staff. We're in full agreement with staff. If the trees can be saved, we'll do it. However, there are two magnolia trees that are in, quite frankly, fair health right off the edge of pavement of Cumming Street, about in this area between units 4 and 5. Okay? Our tree survey showed them on the plan. Michael and his team felt like that the tree survey was off a little bit in dimension. I went out and measured the trees myself personally. So there are some discrepancies in the measurements, but not enough to say that the tree is really on the other side of where we think it is. So I do believe that the streetscape is going to take precedent over those magnolias, yeah, given their condition and health and the location for the streetscape. There are a couple of red buds that are over on this west side. I don't know if you've seen a mature red bud specifically and taken special note of it. They're not very pretty. After they get some number of years on them, they don't look great, and one of these two is actually growing at about a 30-degree angle. So they haven't had a great life. These are red buds that are left over from that residential yard that was there. And again, Michael thought they might be in a place where we could save them. We've got a 25-foot strip there on the end of the Unit 1, that if the red buds fall in there, we'll certainly save them. We're happy to do that. But if they don't, then I believe we could be better suited, even if we plant new red buds. If we plant something else that could grow into a nice tree, would be better.
So the focus here is to save the two big oaks, and that's the reason why the alignment is off from Manning. That's the focus here, instead of the red buds or the magnolias. I know magnolias can be the messiest trees out there. I can't believe it's even a specimen tree, I'll be honest with you.
Well, you let them grow long enough. You let them grow long enough, and they get big enough to be called specimen. Did you know there's such thing as a specimen sweet gum?
I did not know
I had one in my front yard, and David Shostak educated me on that when I wanted to cut it down.
I'm sure he did. I really want to get in that because I think, new developments like this, that streetscape, that consistency, this symmetrical kind of component to it, having those consistent trees in there, you don't want to have a gap and then have something that just looks completely off and then it's, kicking off debris. I want to make sure that streetscape really is planned out the way you have it here.
Great, thank you.
Chris, quick question. I looked up each of the species that were suggested as the native replantings for the riparian area. Mm-hmm. The only thing I wasn't finding is how prone any of those are to deer predation, because with a stream come deer, and you can put a lot of money into planting things and they'll be gone next week if they are tasty deer salad. Any ideas there?
I don't. I'm going to let Pat Corkle speak to that, and
okay,
he's probably going to throw something at me right now for deferring that question to him. But if he can't answer it, I know our ecologist can.
Every resident wants to know that answer.
So, and then I believe David Grace is with us as well to answer any of your architectural questions.
Chris, just really quick, is there any connectivity going out the other way? Do residents have to go out onto the sidewalk and go down to get over to, or is there? I don't see any. Is there any connectivity to East Main? I think there's a road there, or is that not?
We actually explored that with the East of Main folks. Their alley, they have an alley behind their homes that is not, it's fairly close to where our alley is proposed to terminate. And the staff asked us to look at that. We approached them and they were not excited about providing a connection. I'm not speaking for them, but my conclusion is they've got lots already set up and they're being marketed, and they want those lots to be private rather than the possibility of having other people come through there. So I think that was an easy no for them. We didn't press them on it, but they didn't act like they were interested in that. Yeah. So from a vehicle standpoint, what we're showing is where the residents would have to go. Pedestrian-wise, each home will have a sidewalk connection from their front door out to that new sidewalk that Fergal asked about. And this is the gap of sidewalk on Cumming Street on this side. East of Main has built its sidewalk, as you could see in Michael's photos, and there is a sidewalk that exists on the other side of the church driveway all the way up to Main Street. I'm sure that Steve and his neighbors will be walking to downtown quite frequently.
Any further questions? Mr. Lord, are you complete? Are you done? Oh, we have another speaker. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, community members, thank you for the opportunity. My name is David Grace. I'm the president of the Classical Studio. I live at 2564 Hearthstone Circle, Marietta, Georgia. I think Mike did a great job setting up what we're doing. I think one of the questions that we get a lot is about the style. We decided to go with a mix of styles after our first meeting with staff. I think a side conversation with Kathy Cook kind of led to this idea of a more natural feel with a mix of styles. Neighborhoods typically evolve, not as a single style, but as multiple styles, and felt that that would feel really good in the downtown district. As you can see in this rendering, we've got a mix of styles shown here from Tudor, Federal, Georgian, and Greek Revival coming across there, coexisting, naturally along the street. Each home, as Mike said earlier, will have a very distinct and unique elevation, and the majority will be four-sided brick, but we wanted to have the opportunity if somebody came in and wanted a siding house to be able to do that. But the majority will be brick with accents of stone, stucco, timber. Each designer, each home will employ authentic materials and details. We'll have correct, proportioned, and detailed classical elements on the classical homes. We're going to have operable shutters, gas lanterns, window boxes to kind of give the elevations of these houses life. So as you're walking along the street, you can have very pedestrian proportion and scale along the street. We're going to provide outdoor living spaces. I think Steve mentioned that. We're going to have decks and rear porches over the driveway to the back. And we're also going to provide stoops and porches on the front, between the sidewalk and the street, small, neat yards with hedges and low walls to kind of differentiate but invite interaction between public and private space. So I think we've got a really good, strong architectural concept, and we're really excited to bring this to downtown Alpharetta. Any
They
questions?
look very nice, by the way. And the square footage of 3,500. Yeah.
Thank you.
See, the other board members agree with me.
What's the price point of this product?
That's up to Steve.
I don't recall noticing, were these going to include basements or not?
It's the way the lots slope, you'll walk into the main level on the front, and there'll be a drive-under basement from the rear.
Okay, so semi-exposed basement.
Yeah.
Will they be relatively similar roof pitches?
Yeah, the roof pitches will all probably be in the 10 to 12 to 12 and 12 roof pitch. We may have accents that are steeper or lower, lower for a classical pediment over a door or window, maybe steeper for an accent gable for a Tudor revival, but it would be appropriate to the style we're doing.
And for any product that's going to have siding, what type of siding were you looking at using?
It would be a hardy plank siding we would do.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, no further questions at this time.
Thank you.
Is that it for the applicant? Mr. Rorenda? Okay, thank you.
If there's public comment, we would like to
Of course. And with that, I'm going to open the meeting for public comment. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Seeing none, anyone in opposition, please come forward. No one in favor, no one in opposition. I will close public. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'm going to ask one thing, if you don't. I see Jeremy sitting in the audience representing the church, right? You're in support of this. I know you're not coming up to the podium, but I didn't know how this works. Okay. I think it's important that if you don't have a second, come on up here to the podium and talk to us. You represent the church, right, in selling the property to Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir. My name is Jeremy Scott, 530 Veranda Court, Alpharetta, Georgia. Here representing the congregation, the clergy, the Board of Trustees at the Alpharetta First United Methodist Church. I'm currently the church president and chair of the Board of Trustees of the church. I took over that role in 2013 and have been on the Board of Trustees every year since then, serving as chairperson 6 or 7 of those years. So I'm very familiar with this property and the stream buffer project we did in 12 and 13. So when this opportunity kind of was presented to us, we were very excited about it. One, because we had a portion of our property that we've really never been able to utilize or do anything with in kind of that corner. And we're really excited when Steve and his group had some creative ideas of how they might be able to improve that property and create something that would be useful for the community, and also kind of allow us to maximize potentially those resources for other maintenance, repairs, improving our missions to the community, some improvements within the property, and then otherwise debt reduction and some things that we thought would really help our position in the community for far into the future. So we really see this as a blessing for the church. And the Methodist Church has a lot of rules regarding how we can go about a project like this. We operate under something called the Book of Discipline. And it required a significant meeting of the church called church conference to make a decision to participate in a project of this manner. And getting anyone in the church to agree on anything can be very difficult. And we wanted to know that if we did this, we had an overwhelming majority approval from the church. The Book of Discipline only requires a 50% plus 1 vote. But the trustees had decided our threshold would be at least 70% of the congregation had to be in favor of this project if we were to move forward. And after the church vote, it was almost 90% in favor of the project, which we thought, again, from a church perspective, was really an overwhelming, very overwhelming majority of the congregation. So we're really working interactively with Steve and his group on solving any problems that come up, like the parking issue. Happy to help with that, and any other things, and the sharing of the detention pond and maintenance and kind of whatever it takes to move the project forward. Just want to know this group to know that this development has the full-throated and overwhelming support of our entire congregation and clergy and staff, and even the broader Methodist Church. The district that's over the entire North Georgia Conference is overwhelmingly in favor and support of this project.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just want to thank you so much for your leadership and your dedication to the community, what you've done with the church and all the expansion that we've seen in the last few years. It really is an impact to the community. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are we able to ask a question of him?
The board can do anything.
So you have no issues with the joint agreement on the maintenance of the detention pond?
We don't. I mean, obviously, if this moves forward, we'll formalize exactly what that looks like. But in kind of
anytime you're having someone else tap into your, I just want to make sure you're understanding that. I think it's going to have to be an expert.
And when we designed this back in 2012, 2013, we had anticipated some amount of future development, whether on-site or off-site. So that's why we built them so big. And we had an engineer come in 2019 and kind of give us a report on how those detention ponds were looking. and they gave us some recommendations on some repairs and things that were done, and I think we provided all that to the city. So we're very comfortable with that, though, to answer your question.
I have a quick question. Do y'all ever have any events in your parking lot that would create any kind of noise disturbances or lights disturbances that could be an issue for the residents?
Only thing I can think of is trunk or treat, which is around
Right.
Halloween, where we kind of line vehicles up there and people, and it's in the back portion of that property, but it's not at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. It's at 5 o'clock, 6
Right,
o'clock.
okay.
Even during the pandemic, we really haven't had a whole lot of outdoor services. We've done it all virtually. But other than that, I am not aware of any, in the past 10 years, any outdoor events that cause any kind of noise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the church never creates a nuisance, and the neighbors can go to church anyway and avoid it.
We're hoping we can convert some of these new residents to members.
I think you got first right to that.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for your time.
If you'd like to speak, just please come forward. We usually don't do this, but we're making an exception today.
I apologize. My name is Percy Lidback, future resident of the Phase 2 east of Maine. Just two simple questions. One is, can you express some details to how you marry the both properties, Unit 11 and Phase 2 of East Maine? What would that look like? And secondly, is an estimate of what's the start to finish of this project, please?
I would defer to the appropriate person with the applicant to answer that question.
Thank you.
And that's a good question.
Yes.
So two good questions.
Do you mind repeating? I was having a hard time hearing the questions that was asked.
There are two pieces of properties asking about the phasing and sequencing of the construction and the
Timing of the project?
I believe that was your question.
One of the questions, the timing?
What will the finished product be between east of Maine, Phase 2, and your Unit 11 at the end of the property, I guess, as far east of the property? What will that look like? And then secondly, start to finish, just wondering what the length of the project.
Okay. So the area that you're referring to, Lot 11.
If you can please face the microphone so
Yes.
they can pick it up.
I'm sorry. The area between Lot 11 and east of Maine will be landscaped. There's a green space between Lot 11 and the east of Maine. Our property actually, and Chris touched on this in the landscape plan, but the property that we're buying is an assemblage of two properties. It's property that's currently owned by James Schaefer. It's about 0.37 acres. And then we're buying the property from the church, which is about 1.3 acres. So essentially, we're buying everything from the boundary at east of Maine, where that stops, all the way to the curb cut for the church. And so what we're going to do, we'll develop the entire project, the assemblage of those two properties. Depending upon how long it takes us to get our land, again, I'm not being presumptuous, assuming we get approved. If it takes, some period of time to get our land disturbance permit, we'd like to think we'd probably start the site work on this project this summer, early summer, and probably looking at a total project of about 18 months to build all the homes. We're probably not going to build all the homes at once. We'll probably start out with 3 or 4, and then as those get sold, we'll do another 3 or 4, kind of stage that. We've had tremendous, we're not marketing this project. We were in the Business Chronicle, and I've probably gotten a dozen calls from people that wanted to know if they could talk to us about it, and we're just, obviously we're not doing that right now. But I hope that answered your question. Just mainly landscape. Yes, it'll be a landscape area between Lot 11 and east of Maine.
I had a quick question. Are you building on spec or wait for the buyer and then build?
We're going to build spec.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public meeting, and I'll turn this over to the board for discussion and/or a motion, and I would just start off by thanking for both staff. Michael, you always do a good job, and you did it again today, and the applicant. And when I came in, I was not sure about this particular development, but you've made a very good presentation. I know we are running out of space for public institutional type space in Alpharetta generally, but there's been a great demand, especially in this area, for residential. See the Thompson Street development after Avalon and all the other things that are happening in this city. It's just amazing how much this has changed over the last 10 years. You answered most of the questions I had regarding the development. So I am inclined until, of course, I always wait to hear what the other board members have to do, but I'm inclined to vote to recommend approval for the development.
I think I share some of the same thoughts. When Mr. Smith was up here kind of talking, I was thinking the same thing in my mind, that I want to live in downtown. I want to be able to walk, right? Kids are kind of getting a little older, so I want to be in part of downtown. It's a thriving, cool area, the walkability of it. And recently found a tiny little piece of area to go build a house, and it's just like this. There's a lot of demand for this. And the one thing I really like about it is it's not a townhome. And it's a detached single-family house. They're just running out of space, but people really like this product to be able to go out and interact and have the hospitality of it. It kind of fits in a little bit with Cricket Lane, kind of coming from East Main, making this all kind of a residential corridor with across the street. You have all the hospitality so close by. I mean, it's a tight envelope, but that's what you do with these spaces, in the dense area of downtown, and that's why we have the overlay piece there. I don't see any issues with really, it lines up to everything that Mr. Woodman kind of addressed as far as the city and our downtown zone of what we plan for. And I see number 17 as being something that it looks like staff's already worked out, and we can work through that.
I just think eventually all of these different groups, there's a lot of walkability between these, and we're not siloed, all of these different developments, how they work together, and have a lot of connectivity amongst groups.
I was particularly concerned about the buffers and especially the stormwater quantity management, and to an extent quality management, but seems like you have put a lot of thought to this and addressed it in an adequately sufficient manner. And of course, the church was another concern, and it seems like the church is in full support of the project. So most of my concerns were addressed during the presentation.
And I would agree. I think everything on everyone's already said, and the only thing I was looking for was the joint maintenance agreement, but as Michael pointed out, that would be taken care of at a staff level before they do. But I do think that's necessary anytime you're, protecting the future residents on the maintenance of that pond for sure, but I don't think it needs to be a condition if it's definitely going to be addressed at a later date.
I tend to feel as though infill development is almost always most challenged by dealing with what's left for stormwater management for the area involved. Everybody around it has already done what they're going to do, so you have to figure out how to solve the problem that's sort of bottlenecked right where you are. And I do, from looking at staff's conditions, feel that they have spelled out conditions that will adequately address it and create a pretty area on top of it, not just another eyesore ditch in the back of the property. So I would agree that all conditions that I was concerned about are addressed, and I do like the look of the product too.
Architectural design looks good. I like the pocket park and the intention to save what trees you can.
I concur with my fellow mates here, and I would like to make a motion. Motion to approve CLUP-21-01/Z-21-02/V/21-03 of 1858, subject to the following conditions as noted by staff. However, removing Item number 17, widths and lengths of fire department access roads shall comply with Appendix D.
A motion has been made and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. It's going to be heard by council on the 22nd, I believe, and council always makes the final decision. We work for council to recommend, and at the pleasure of council is what I meant to say. And Chris, you are a very eloquent presenter. So you are a very eloquent presenter.
Thank you, Francis.
And so are the other presenters. So we
Try.
we appreciate your coming in, and come back on the 22nd.
I'll be back on the 20th.
Anything else needs to be discussed by the board? Hearing, meeting is adjourned, and it's about 8:50.
Is it?
You said 8:50?
No.